Hello, and welcome to another exciting edition of the School Safety Free Period podcast. I'm Amanda Klinger.
And I'm Dr. Amy Klinger.
And we are with the Educators School Safety Network. We're a national nonprofit organization, and we provide school safety training and resources and technical assistance to K-12 schools throughout the United States and Canada. And every once in a while, when we're being a little bit slightly less serious and a little bit slightly less academic, we do this, our School Safety Free Period, where we talk a little bit more freewheeling fashion about school safety issues that educators face. So, what are we discussing today?
Well, today it's Change It Up Day because you're the one that has an offering to bring to the table.
Yes. So I wanted to talk today about a story that was in the news a little while ago at this point. It was in New York Times and then covered in a number of other news outlets talking about a situation at a middle school where a number of students, and it's kind of uncertain how many students, created TikTok accounts using photos of teachers that they scraped from either official school websites or social media, or from some of the publicly accessible information from the teacher's own private social media accounts, and used those photos to create TikTok accounts where they were impersonating or pretending to be those teachers and were sharing and creating different videos and TikTok videos and liking them and sharing them and remixing them, but where there was often something really, really inappropriate happening. There were intimations or allegations of grooming, of other sexually inappropriate things, racist, xenophobic, all kinds of troubling and objectionable content. And it caused really quite an uproar in this school because it was impacting so many of the teachers. And it sparked a really interesting conversation about student speech, about the limits on student speech. And a lot of teachers were really responding, not just in this school, but teachers generally responding really strongly to the concern of, this is my life, this is my livelihood. People are out here impersonating me and doing these horrific, horrendous things. And there's potentially a real life consequence for me as a professional when someone has put out there on the internet forever and ever for everyone to see these horrible, awful things, and they are linked, however falsely, linked to me. So it's sparked a lot of really interesting conversations about the limits of free speech and what that looks like. What I've had a number of my students in my courses ask me about this from a legal standpoint in terms of what is the recourse for the teachers to be able to do something about it. And I think probably most importantly, I like to discuss kind of the climate and culture impact of what do you do at a school like that where there is such a fractured relationship. I mean, it is a very adversarial situation now in that school between those students and those teachers.
Well, question. Of course, now we're in the TikTok realm, so I have no idea what I'm talking about, as usual. So here we go. But you mentioned the limits of student speech. This is not student speech. This is impersonating. So this is not student speech. This is me doing I would assume, criminal act by impersonating someone else and making allegations and other illegal or illicit sort of things. So how does that even contribute or fall within the realm of student speech when a student speech is when I'm speaking as myself, a student. Yeah. But how is it protected when I'm impersonating or committing fraud?
Well, so there's a couple of things. We just became a school law podcast just with that question. It happened. So how is this student speech? We're talking about students have some free speech rights. And in this,
As themselves.
after. And in this instance, it doesn't, that seems like at this point, the school decided not to have any sort of disciplinary consequence for the students.
Really?
Well, I think the situation was that they were not able to prove that the speech happened during the school day or on campus or with school-owned device or technology or Wi-Fi.
But did it not pose a substantive disruption to the educational process?
Sure, and you are speaking to sort of the old distinction of the sort of the Tinker standard from Tinker versus Des Moines, where the Supreme Court finds that students have free speech rights, but that educators and educational leaders have the right to be able to discipline student speech when it causes a substantial disruption to the educational process. However, if you look at the more recent Supreme Court case of Mahanoy, which is the one where it was the cheerleader on Snapchat saying, F cheer, F this, blah, blah, blah. The Supreme Court actually walked that back quite a bit. And you can understand why. When Tinker was decided in the 60s, there was a very clear delineation between my speech that happened at school and that obviously students have a diminished expectation of free speech rights while they're in an American public school. However, now with the technology that we have, it's a lot harder to say when am I at school or when am I not. When is it reasonably foreseeable that my speech would reach school? When would it not? Now, in the Mahanoy case where that girl that's the cheerleader on Snapchat said F cheer, F this, F whatever, and she did not publicly broadcast it. She just sent it to some of her friends, and somebody took a screenshot and publicly broadcasted it, which is how it came to the attention of the cheerleading advisors, and she was disciplined. Sure, I think in the case that we're talking about with this sort of like TikTok impersonation ring, to me it seems like a little bit of a different situation that you shouldn't have known that this would have an impact on the school. This wasn't like a kid who was on TikTok making inflammatory TikToks about, I don't know.
Right. I mean, it was
or something
deliberate. It was deliberate and premeditated.
Yeah. So I do think it's a little interesting that the school decided not to enact disciplinary consequence in this situation. And I kind of think that, that the recent, even the more restrictive recent Supreme Court precedent would have been on their side. Now, your other question, you said that they're not speaking as students because they're impersonating someone and perpetrating a fraud. Unfortunately, fraud in most states doesn't work that way. You have to show.
Well, I don't mean a fraud legally. I mean they're acting in a fraudulent manner, saying that they're teacher XYZ when in reality they're not.
Right. And so unfortunately, just from a legal standpoint, the recourse for those teachers is really less about discipline for the students and more about you could have a civil case where you could sue the person who was impersonating you and claiming that you were a predator or this or that or whatever. The reality is most people don't have the capability to bring such a civil lawsuit against a student and their parents, and even if you did, you probably wouldn't hardly win anything because it's unlike doing a slander or a libel case against the New York Times, who has assets. You don't really have much to go after. So
how many kids were involved, do you know?
I don't know off the top of my head, but it was quite a few. Right? And one thing that I thought was really interesting is a couple of the students, after the ring kind of got busted up, a couple of students posted a quote-unquote apology video where they did not apologize, and they said that everyone needs to lighten up, and you all are adults, and we're just kids, and you need to not take this stuff so seriously. Well, so, I mean, I think, if you look at, teachers don't have a great recourse, right? So their professional, their reputations are very much in jeopardy, based on, what kids are able to do. There's the potential for real harm, not emotional harm, but harm to their profession, harm to their careers, and there's not a really attractive recourse. And I think, it's interesting that the school district in this instance declined to have discipline consequences. What is your sort of reaction to that? I mean, like if you were, I understand you didn't have TikTok when you were a principal, but if you had a similar fact pattern, or if you were a principal today, would you have enacted discipline consequences?
I mean, it's tough for me to say, but I do think that as the principal, I have a responsibility to advocate and protect my staff and my students from the harmful actions of others, whether they are 13 or 30.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would think there's certainly. I would think that would definitely have been something that I would have done. Now maybe it gets overturned, or I mean, yeah, I'm assuming that there was difficulty proving some of it. Probably it might have been a lot of hearsay of, well, somebody told me that so and so did it. I mean, I don't know the specifics of it, but I mean, well, my initial reactions are very like old lady reactions, like, why don't these kids have anything better to do, blah blah blah, and like they're not working hard enough and need to give them some more homework if they have time. So I didn't really like articulate those, I just thought them. But then the flip side of that is, why can't you take these kids and let's get them into student council? If you could organize a mass campaign, can we turn that force to good that you are able to do that? And then there's, of course, the reaction of, why are any of us on TikTok or social media, please? But okay, so those are all the old lady reactions.
Well, I think your point of, maybe it would have been overturned, I think it's good to sort of recall the fact patterns of some of the big, more recent student speech cases. I mean, you have ones in the early internet where you have a student or a couple students make a website saying that this teacher is this, that, allegation, inappropriate, creepy, this thing. And in some of these fact patterns where these students are disciplined, the students have like made a website and like no one has seen it.
Yeah.
So you have ones like that. You have ones where, they make a Facebook page making fun of the principal and all of these, some of them, they're not even like horrible allegations. They're just like nasty, like he's,
yeah.
And you have those where hardly anybody has seen it, and then they discipline the student. And so and I think this specific instance really calls into that question of, what do you, if you opted to discipline students in this situation, are you disciplining them because I didn't like the speech, because you were nasty? Or are you disciplining the speech because it has a real impact on the business of the school? You know what I mean? Like,
right.
If I'm a middle school teacher and my students make an Instagram account where they post a picture of my shoes every day and say I have ugly, dumb shoes, there's sort of the part of you that goes, you just need to ignore that. Like, it's middle schoolers making fun of your shoes. It starts to become a different thing when it is so pervasive, and the allegations and the insinuations are so serious.
Yeah.
That it's hard to say, in this instance, it would be hard or irresponsible to say to your teachers, just ignore where they scraped pictures of your actual family, your actual kids.
Yeah.
They scraped those. They're impersonating you and saying that you like to touch kids. I don't know how anyone would say, you know what, you need to ignore that. And so the question is, can we land in some sort of a common sense response?
Well, but the thing that I find most, and maybe it's because I don't understand TikTok, but the thing that I find most interesting / troubling is this whole discussion that really has nothing to do with TikTok of saying, oh, we're just kids. You can't hold us accountable for bringing a gun or beating someone senseless or claiming someone's a predator. But yet at the same notion, we, on the other hand, are giving kids privileges and powers that are potentially beyond their age as well. So, if you're going to, I don't know, I'm going to play sports at the most elite level and I'm going to, dress in a certain way, or I'm going to have these experiences, or I'm allowed to do this, and I do all these things that are, quote unquote, more mature beyond my age. I can't really hide behind this idea. I mean, it's different if I went on TikTok and, like you said, I made fun of, I made a derogatory name out of this person's last name. But to go, well, you can't hold me accountable, but yet I managed to select and strategically use the most damaging, offensive things that I could. It's not just she is, like you said, she dresses funny or her kids are weird. It's like really specific, strategically damaging things. You can't hide behind, well, we're just kids. And I think is troubling in a lot of ways that have nothing to do with social media, because we see that a lot with other things. Well, I know I had all these bomb-making materials, but I'm just a kid, so what would you expect?
Yeah. I think, it's obviously raises a ton of really interesting questions. I think the climate culture one for that school is really interesting, because some of those kids will be in that school next year, and some of those teachers will be in that school next year.
Well, but you have to question, and I'm not saying this is true, I'm literally questioning. You have to sort of question, you can say, well, we had a couple of kids that did this. Okay, you're going to have a couple of kids in any school that are going to behave in a negative, antisocial, even really, derogatory sort of way. But to have a coordinated effort where you have, at least a handful, a significant number of kids who feel so disenfranchised or so disconnected from those individuals that they're willing to really, really target them. I mean, that's the other climate and culture kind of question.
Yeah. And it happened over a long period of time. It's not like
we had a slumber party and just did something funny.
Right. It's not like here I am in class and I'm bad and I blurt out, well, your shoes are ugly. This is something that happened.
You really got a thing with the shoes on this particular time.
A way of not punching down. And also because
I take great pride in my shoes.
I just feel, as opposed to like using a stand-in of something about someone's actual appearance or what they are. It seems to me like a good, and also I am a bit of a sneakerhead, and so if someone made fun of my shoes, I would be upset, but I'd have to rise above.
Okay.
So anyway, I think
to your point, sorry.
This is something that was premeditated in the sense that they did it a lot over a long period of time.
That is troubling too.
The whole I'm just a kid. I made a dumb mistake.
I'm impulsive.
Right.
No.
And, sometimes that is the case, that you have kids that do something, say something, and then they're like, oh no. Here, those students really had an opportunity to go, oh, we shouldn't.
And it does make you wonder if you had, a few people that start that, and then you have other kids that, for whatever reason, felt there was a permission structure in place that would be like, yes, this is fine. This is okay to do. I mean, that's disconcerting as well.
So absolutely, we raised probably a ton more questions, the answers, but we'd love to hear from you. Is this something that you and your colleagues discussed? Is this a concern? What would this look like? How do you think you could get out in front of something like this with your students? What would that look like if you're a school leader? What are you doing differently, or what are the conversations that you're having with your faculty and staff about this sort of concern and what that could look like? And importantly, what are you doing with students to teach about citizenship, digital citizenship, and I guess sort of basic human decency and empathy? But what does that look like, and what are your thoughts and your questions and concerns? You can always shoot us an email. It's info@eschoolsafety.org. And also, don't forget to head to our website, www.eschoolsafety.org. We have tons of free resources available. We have other episodes of this podcast. and let us know what we can do to help. Thanks so much.